All right. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Best Self Blueprint. So, as you all know, the mission of this podcast is to bring on people with the knowledge, insights, and experiences that'll help you move that dial towards becoming the best version of yourself, whatever that means to you. So, before we get going, again, this is a free resource, but we want this information to get to as many people as possible. So, because of that, we would greatly appreciate it if you would share this video with others. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all the typical stuff on YouTube that we ask you to do. But getting into it, the guest today is a PT. She has both performed herself and coached others in CrossFit and is just overall very educated in the health and fitness world. So I will let her give you the background on herself, but to officially introduce Sarah Sawall.
Thanks, Trevor. I'm Dr. Sarah. I have been a physical therapist for about 4 or 5 years now. Math is hard sometimes. But I originally got into physical therapy because I was a semi-professional speed skater, had a lot of injuries of my own, and ultimately ended up stepping away from the sport because I couldn't find a physical therapist or chiropractor who could help me do what I loved without pain and keep competing. And then went to PT school, learned a lot. If I knew now what I would have known, if I knew what I knew now back then, things might have been a little bit different. But nonetheless, I am here and I'm enjoying helping people do what they love without discomfort.
Heck yeah. So, and that's where we're going to start. So, I promised her, everybody, that I would make sure I started with this before I forgot. And it really is something, as someone who grew up with an athletic background, I was always playing team sports, individual sports. I genuinely did believe that like there were just some things that you had to just deal with, whether it was like an ache, a pain, something, but that's really not the case. So if you could run people through kind of that misconception of like just fight through the pain and like just there's not just you have to deal with the nagging injury, but there's actually usually an answer. So if you could just run people through your much more educated than me background on that.
Sure. So I would say the majority of people that I see, I hear comments like, oh, I've been told I have bad knees, so I need to stop running, or I just have a bad back, so I won't be able to deadlift. And usually 9 times out of 10, there's something else going on. Like it could be just an improper increase in training volume. It could be a mismatch in strength or flexibility. But 9 times out of 10, it's not that you have a bad body part or that your body is broken. The human body is incredibly resilient. And when it's given the keys to be able to do what it needs to do, 9 times out of 10, you can perform without pain and without injury and enjoy what you're doing instead of having to just drudge through it and have it be more of a chore.
Yeah. So what is, and this is something that I was genuinely curious about for a long time from a PT perspective, what is kind of the most common thing you see from people who, let's say they went from like just a very unhealthy lifestyle to now they are getting in the gym, they are getting workouts in, but now they tweak something or do something wrong. What are the most common mess ups or things that you see people get challenged with as they start beginning the journey of fitness?
It's a good question. There's a couple that I tend to see. One is people get injured and then they just stop doing something or they completely avoid that body part altogether. And in reality, physical therapy is kind of finding a way to keep strengthening something that's injured and keep training something that's injured while keeping pain to appropriate levels. And so the number one mistake I see people make is they just like say their shoulder hurts, they quit doing everything with their shoulder except for maybe a few accessory exercises they found on the internet that they think are helpful, which usually they are helpful, but they're usually just not doing them at the right dosage or the right intensity. But the number one thing is stopping doing something and just assuming that rest is going to make something better. And in reality, rest never solves people's problems. If it's a stress fracture, then yes, it does. But overwhelmingly, people rest when they shouldn't be.
That is, yeah, and that's so true. And our conversation a few days ago, I like the word that you use, which is like dosage. And people tend not to push themselves as hard as they need to get the results that they're looking for. If you could talk on that too, like what have you seen? Like, why is it that people don't do that? What holds them back?
I think a big part of it is fear of making the injury worse on like a patient side or a person who's injured side. And I think another big part of it is on the provider side of not truly understanding the load that's necessary to actually have strength gains. If a physical therapist doesn't has never tested a 1RM or they've never strength trained themselves, there's no way they're going to understand how much load they're putting on a patient and what that patient is actually capable of. And so, at least one of the reasons why I branched out on my own was I was very frustrated with people being underdosed. And if you're underdosed, you're not actually getting stronger. So, a good example of this is like all the TheraBand exercises you see PTs doing. TheraBand has its place. I'm not dissing on TheraBand, but if you're giving someone a yellow TheraBand that's got 2 pounds of resistance and that person can snatch 135 pounds, you've got the wrong dosage. Like there's no way 2 pounds is going to make a difference if their pain doesn't start till they're snatching 65 pounds. So the dosage has to be appropriate.
Yeah. And again, these are things I feel like you've taken that kind of next dive into the mechanics of how the body works and what's actually going to make it better once you have these, even if it's not an injury, even if it's just like a little ache, little dull pain. What have you seen? So let's say, because you talked about you do have people who come in for injuries, but you also have people who come in for just wellness and performance. What are the best tips that you have for people who let's say they've been working out for a year, few years, decade, they're in a good routine, but now they do want to kind of amp it up, take it to the next level. What are kind of the fundamentals of people who have already been doing it for a while? What do you typically run people through?
So, like, what the next steps are if they've already got a good solid base.
Yeah.
Okay. I usually look first at lifestyle stuff because most people think they have good lifestyle habits. And then when you actually dig into them, they don't have as good of lifestyle habits as they could. And if you're not getting at least minimum 6 hours of sleep per night, all the accessory work in the world is not going to make a huge difference for you. If you don't have the sleep dialed in, if you don't have the nutrition dialed in, like there's not a lot that I can help someone with. It's the difference isn't going to be as significant if I give them various exercises or do any hands-on stuff. Like the big building blocks at the bottom of the pyramid are really sleep and nutrition and just general conditioning. And so I make sure those are nailed in. And if those are solid, then I tend to look at overall mobility. I ask about what lifts are difficult, like what do you want to do that you're struggling with, and dive into why they're struggling there, and then narrow in on that and go more specific, like accessory work or hands-on work to improve those deficits. But I start with the big building blocks first.
Yeah. So you just dialed in on exactly why I'm at where I'm at right now doing this show, more or less, is I started in the fitness industry just as a fitness instructor, personal trainer. And it was one of those things where, naive little me was thinking, well, if they're crushing their workouts, like they should be seeing progress, right? No, you're in the gym 1 out of 24 hours a day. And hopefully you're not in the gym cranking out workouts 7 days a week. Hopefully, you have the right regimented program. So you're really like less than 5% of your time is allocated to the actual like hard hitting fitness portion. And once I realized that, it was like, oh crap, you're right. There is more to this puzzle. There is more to this equation. So diving into like, okay, what is proper nutrition? What is proper sleep and recovery? And once you open up that can of worms, there's a lot of complexities. Like I consider it like a rabbit hole. The deeper you dive, the more science you find. You can just turn into a robot trying to figure out how to optimize it. But yeah, like you said, at the end of the day, I strive for, at least myself, 7.5, 8 hours of sleep minimum. I am a total wimp with that. If I get only 6 hours of sleep, you'll know. And then with nutrition, and I'm curious what your mindset is around this. At least mine, and what I talk to my clients is like, you're still a human being. If you like beer, I'm not going to say never have another beer again in your entire life. If you like chocolate, I'm never going to say like no chocolate. If I see you with it, I'll slap it out of your hand. Like, no, you're still a human being. There's still a life to be lived. There's still things to enjoy. but it's understanding how that fits in the bigger scheme of macronutrients, micronutrients, balancing everything out, hitting your caloric windows, understanding what macros to be eating at what times. And I think if you can dial in on kind of those like fundamental building blocks, it makes everything easier as you build up.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I take a very similar approach with, because when clients come to see me, I typically give them some sort of stuff to do at home because again, they're seeing me for 1 hour, like maybe once a week. For some, it's once a month. So there's what they're doing outside is going to be the make or break factor most of the time on whether or not they get better. And I typically start off by saying, all right, this is your optimal dosage. This is like the minimum required dosage. Here's your window. What is realistic for you based on your circumstances? Because some people have crazy busy lives and other people are like, I don't care what it takes. I want every single piece of information that I can possibly use. And I mean, there's a balance to life. Like I have a beer on the weekends. I had a beer last night with dinner. Like you have to enjoy life too. Like the whole purpose of really being here, I feel, is to experience life. And so you do what you need to do to experience life the way it's best for you.
Yeah, that is so true. And that's why, so if people like really pay attention to what I'm saying at the beginning, it can get repetitive for people who listen in to every show. But I do add that at the end. I say moving you towards the best version of yourself, whatever that means to you. So like my version of what my best self looks like in my head is going to be so different than what yours is for you, or what, you, whoever is listening, what that is for you. It's going to be different. There are going to be people who want to have two nights a week where they can crack open a beer, or, maybe take a tequila shot or something. There's going to be people who don't want to do that. There's going to be people who want to crush heavy weights. There's going to be other people who just want to dance and walk, maybe shoot a basketball every once in a while. And so it's just understanding how to optimize. There are things you're going to have to do if you want to live, a great lifestyle, but there's ways to make that fun and enjoyable. And I think that's kind of what gets lost in translation is, like, once you get into that world of like self-development, you're like, I got to be disciplined. I got to have grit. I got to have willpower. And then fun just kind of trickles off to the wayside. And you almost get like resentful of pursuing this growth because you don't think you can entangle the two.
Yeah. Yeah. The people who I see have the best results just in terms of experiencing life the way they want to and getting the most out of their rehab programs while still improving their symptoms are the ones who take a flexible approach. They're like, I need to get this done at least 3 days a week. If I get it done 5 days, that's awesome. And we're going to shoot for somewhere in there. So that way, if they miss one day, it's not like, oh my gosh, I failed. It's like, okay, didn't make it today, but I'll try tomorrow. And like giving yourself some grace and not being harsh with yourself.
Yeah. So I I do want to move on to asking about the semi-pro skating, but I have one last question on this topic while we're here. So let's say I'm one of your clients. You give me a program. Let's say I had like a nagging injury in my shoulder. You give me the program, you give me the optimal, you give me the minimal. We figure out where my realistic, approach is. I crush it for 2 weeks, and then you don't see me for like a month. And I stop back in, I'm struggling. I know I'm struggling. What do you say to someone in that situation who they did seek out the help, they did get the information, they did start the process, and then they slipped up and never got back on?
So the way I would see that then is that I dropped the ball. Because typically at the end of every appointment, we discuss when that person's coming back in and we set that up unless they're good and they're self-managing. And if they're self-managing, then I check in a month. But in that case, like if they were really struggling, then I made a mistake clinically in judging how well they were doing or misinterpreted what they were telling me. So I tend to own up to that and be like, hey, I thought we were here. We're clearly not here. You want to get to a different place. What's it going to take to get you there? Like, how fast do you want to get there? At what speed do you want to get there? Because some people, we end up deciding to stop care because it's just not the right time in their life. And it's not that their foot pain or their shoulder pain isn't important. It's that maybe their mom passed away. Like they've got other stuff that's more important at the time. And so we'll typically have a conversation too, like, where does this fall for you on your priority scale? Like, is this top priority? Is this not top priority? And if it is top priority, then we brainstorm ways to make it easier for them to do stuff. So I often will change exercises to make it so they can just fit it into their day, or it's a short burst of activity, like right when they're done with a workout. So they can do it at the gym before they go home. They don't have to worry about their kids bothering them. So I'll change it to make it easier for them if that's where they want to go. And if they're like, this I care about this is important, but I just can't handle it right now. I'm like, that's fine. I'll reach out in a month. I'll give you a call, I'll give you a text, we'll check in, we'll see how you're doing. And if then it's the right time, we'll take it from there. If it's not, I'll check back in another month. So it varies, but it's a multi-targeted answer.
So I really want people to take away not even just what you said, but I've talked multiple times on here about extreme ownership. So there are a lot of very big name people who talk about extreme ownership. They give great examples. That may very well have been the best example I've heard thus far. Is it wasn't you who fell off the bandwagon. It wasn't you who got the program and fell off, but you still take ownership and say like, no, there is definitely something I could have done to make sure that they had an easier transition, to make sure that they were able to stick to it. Maybe I didn't follow up. Maybe I didn't give them, you know, enough information, or like the information that really would have stuck with them. And so that, for anyone listening or watching, that is the epitome of extreme ownership, where it may not be 100% your fault, but it's up to you if you want to truly help people, or if you want to truly help yourself. Extreme ownership is a non-negotiable. And Sarah is such a good example of that. Like, if you didn't catch that, I want you to actually rewind this, because she had no clue I was going to ask that question. And that is what it takes. Like, whether it's, which we're going to get into it to a second, whether it's competing at a high level in sports, whether it's competing at a high level in business, whether it's just leveling up in life and progressing and growing, you do need to take that approach of like, it doesn't matter what they did. What could I have done better, differently, added, subtracted, changed? So that is like the perfect way to end kind of that portion of this. But I do want to kind of transition now into your athletic background, because you did have a lot of success as a skater. You are an absolute machine from what I've seen in the gym, whether it's with CrossFit, whether it's just with like general lifting and conditioning. And you're very focused. Like, you have a very like focused attitude and mindset when it comes to, I mean, even during our conversation again a few days ago, you're not distracted. You're not worried about other things. You're very dialed into what you're doing. Is that, do you think, one of the biggest contributing factors to you having success in business, in athletics, in life in general? Is that just like ability to have that singular focus?
It might be. I do, my husband tells me I'm very, very focused a lot of the times. And like if I'm working, like no interruptions, like I need to be in the zone. And I think part of that is the focus, but I think part of it honestly was the way I was raised too. My mom was always, I hated it at the time and was not thrilled with it, but she was very much like, you need to give 100% or you're not doing it. It was not a, well, yeah, sure, do whatever. It was, if you don't give 100, she literally at one speed skating meet pulled me aside when she thought I wasn't doing my best. And she's like, if you're not going to try 100%, I'm not taking you. And I was like, oh, like as like a 10-year-old, I was like, she's like, and I knew not to mess with her in that situation. But I think it kind of boiled down to that, where my mom, I think, had a really good understanding of what hard work was. And she taught me that through example and through being quite bossy.
And I do think, obviously I am not a parent. I don't plan to be anytime soon. So we'll just start with that. I'm not speaking from experience or any level of expertise, but it is fascinating to me how society has kind of developed to like, if kids just show up, that's good enough. I am obviously like, your kids aren't always going to be thrilled with it, but I do think it's important to show kids as they grow up, like, yeah, there's plenty of time, like relax, have fun, like go with your friends, just chill. But like when you do commit to something, whether it's sports, whether it's, you know, any task, any given task that you say you're going to do and you commit to it, you do need that level of like, I'm going to give everything I have to this task. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to get it done to the best of my ability. And I obviously that shows up for you. I mean, we were talking about like your business is getting to the point where you're expanding and scaling. You went semi-pro in skating, which is no small feat. When it came down to, because I feel like everyone hits this, whether it's in business, in sports, in life, whatever. When you would hit that next level, let's say you went from JV to varsity, varsity to college, college to semi-pro, whatever your transition was, what were the typical things that would trip you up as you moved up to the next level?
I think the biggest thing would be like a confidence, because you have to have the confidence that you're going to be able to do it. Because when you go to that next level, you're not on top. You've gone from a position of being on top to being on the bottom. And initially, that used to really scare me and be intimidating, because you're like, crap, I'm not as good as I thought I was. Like, all these other people are so much better. But that's when you also have the most growth. So, one of the things that I've kind of switched to doing is like intentionally trying to not be the smartest person in the room. Like, when I hire someone, I want that person to know more than me about certain areas and be a better clinician in certain areas than me, so I can learn from them too. So I think a good chunk of it is being uncertain, and not necessarily, you're going to see yourself a little bit differently confidence wise, but being willing to take that step anyways.
Yeah, so this is something, and I think the reason this was a struggle for me, just like very bluntly, was my ego. Like when you get to the top of whatever tier you're at, you do kind of get that like I'm the shit mentality, more or less, like I'm the best. And I think when you do, like, you break into that next tier and you notice you're at the bottom now of that tier, your ego does, it takes a big hit. And now I've kind of embraced the mentality that you're talking about of like, even if there are people better than you, smarter than you, stronger than you, which no matter who you are, unless like you're Usain Bolt, like that is going to be the case. Be confident in the skills you've acquired. Like just because there is someone, yeah, maybe they've had more experience, they have a little better skill set, they're more sharpened in that area. That doesn't mean you're bad in that area. Like own your skill set and be confident about the things that you've accomplished and the things that you've acquired, skills, experience, otherwise. But don't allow your ego to stop you from seeking that white belt mentality, is what I call it. So like being curious, asking questions of the people that you know are above you in terms of like skill set or experience in that certain area. And I think that's really wise of you to hire people who are more advanced in that area, because not only now are they going to be able to assist in helping your clients in that area, but you're going to be able to now use them as a resource to learn yourself. And so that's something that I've drastically shifted. Was, again, I was driven by ego for a while in my like late teens, 20s was when I started kind of figuring some stuff out. But now I'm at the point where I was trying to be the smartest person in the room. I was trying to have like the best stories and be the guy with the most charisma. And now I'm to the point where I'm like, screw that, dude. I want to be in a room with like the best personal trainer in the world, the best dietitian in the world, the best athletes, like, and the best business people, just so I can get curious and ask questions and become a student again. Because it really turns into a very cool thing when you almost make the world your school and you get to take whatever classes you want, and the grade you get is dependent on how curious you get and how aggressive you get in your pursuit of more knowledge in that area.
Yeah, totally. There's one of the values for Resilience RX that I have is like continually learning. So like always seeking to learn, whether it's clinical skills, whether it's people skills, like a whole bunch of different stuff. Like learning, experiencing new things and growing from it, I think is one of the key things that makes life fun and challenging.
So, and one thing that I'm curious about, because not only have you achieved like very high level at the things that you've done, but you've gone and done like a lot of what people would consider risky things, I guess. Like starting your own business is not exactly known as like the safest bet in the world. What what drives you to go out and like pursue these new things? Is it just the fact that the desire to do it is greater than the fear not to do it? Do you not have fear surrounding these new endeavors? Like what is that conversation in your head like as you take on these new ventures?
I think if anyone said they didn't have fear in surrounding like a new adventure, I think they'd be lying. Um, I think what I enjoy really is the adventure of it. Like you don't know if it's going to succeed or it's going to fail, but you do know it's going to push you, it's going to challenge you, it's going to change you, and you're going to come out a totally different person on the other side. And I think I like adventure and I like a challenge. I tend to seek those out. And if I'm not constantly learning, I tend to get bored. So I like the fact that when I go to work, like I have to show up on ready to perform and I learn something almost every single day. So that I enjoy. And if I'm not challenged, I don't like it.
And I really do think this is the best self blueprint, people. So I'm giving my opinion on what it does take to become that best version of yourself. It takes risk. And I genuinely believe that in order to have the success in all areas of life that you want, you have to get to the point where you almost enjoy that controlled fear. Like obviously you're not just like running and jumping off a cliff. Like yes, if you start a new business, if you ask that person out, if you try to, crush a one rep max, like there's controlled risk. When you're doing the one rep max, wow. You set it up so that like you've got spotters, you've got safety equipment, so you can still take that risk knowing that like you're not going to die. Like what, and like you said, when you take on these challenges, whether you succeed or not, you will learn something. And when you fail, you tend to actually learn a lot more quickly because it really presents that immediate like, oh snap, I have to figure this out now. And it kind of implements that sense of urgency. But obviously you're not like striving for failure, you're trying to succeed. But and so like what's your opinion on that? Do you think that is a prerequisite for having success in an area, is being willing to and seeking out that risk and I guess sense of adventure in that given area?
I think it's a willingness to tolerate being uncomfortable. Most people don't like being uncomfortable. And whenever in order to grow, you have to be uncomfortable. And I think it's a matter of how good people are at and sitting in that discomfort and not like sitting in it in a way that leads to like being depressed, but sitting in it in a way that leads you to reflect and intentionally change things and intentionally pursue things. And a lot of our culture tends to be like, oh, this hurts, I must run from it. Like I'm in pain, I need to fix this now. Whereas if we listen to it, like pain can be a really good teacher of how you should move and how you shouldn't move. So I think a lot of it is the willingness to be uncomfortable and not let that drive your emotions when you are uncomfortable.
When do you think we learn? Because I I have thought about this for a while and I really don't know the answer. Maybe you have some insights, but at what point in our lives do you think we develop that mindset of like naturally running away from things that are uncomfortable? Because obviously it's like, if you put your hand on a hot stove, you take it off, like that's one thing. But in terms of just like, again, like being vulnerable and, asking someone out or being vulnerable and risking your savings to invest in a startup, like, do you think it is just the brain and its negative information bias, or do you think it is like a learned trait?
I think it's both because we're wired to protect ourselves, right? So we're wired not to take on risk. So in and of itself, it's uncomfortable. But then, and I think some of it too depends on your upbringing because my father was an entrepreneur and my mom supported him through it. And my sister owns her own business as well. And so I think it's part of how you're raised, like you're raised to run away from discomfort, but I think the degree of which you're taught that depends on who you're around. And the degree of risk you're willing to undertake depends on the degree of risk and subsequent or not subsequent success you've seen as a result of other people doing it.
So how intentional are you with like what friends you hang around, what people you invest your time in? Is that something where you really do like kind of audit or vet the people you spend time with in your head and think like, okay, like, is this someone who's gonna kind of rub off positively on me? Or is it just like, oh, I've been friends with Sally for years, like doesn't really matter? Like how much effort or attention do you give that area of your life?
I would say it depends on the circle of friends that I'm in at the moment. So like I'm in a mastermind, which is a mentorship group that kind of continues to push you forwards. And so like in terms of mentorship and growth, I make sure I'm surrounded by people who are going to push me and who also push themselves. And I would say my closest friends do the same thing. Um, and I haven't been necessarily conscious, like I can probably say that wrong, whatever, um conscious in like choosing that, but I think it just naturally happened because I had more in common with them and therefore we formed a friendship.
Yeah, that's something because I have a good mix. Given who I was 4 or 5 years ago, I was the person who was going out, drinking, partying, essentially doing like nothing for my future, aside from breathing, I guess, and eating. But I really did hit this point of like out of nowhere, I kind of just turned on the jets and was like, all right, let's go. Like reading books, exercising, eating healthy, talking to new people. And so there was this almost dichotomy of like I had my old self and my old version of who I was in my head, and there were people who recognized me as that, and now I had this Trevor 2.0 version who was a drastically different, almost completely different human being. And so that's why I ask people like you who do you have that winner's mindset, you have that winner's edge, and you can just see it, especially obviously we're over video, but like I met with her in person a few days ago. You can definitely see it when you look in someone's eyes, whether or not they have that, and you do. And so you're the type of people I like to ask of like, who do you surround yourself with? And do you put a lot of focus on that? Because although, yes, this is my show, I'm more or less just the student when I bring people on. So I'm always curious kind of how you set up those other areas of your life. Like you talked about at the beginning with your clients, you don't just look at the health and fitness or the health and wellness, you look at kind of other pieces to see if there's something else affecting what you're focused on.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard it said that you're like the sum of the five people you spend the most time with or something like that. But and I've heard that, but I don't think it ever, I think it just kind of naturally happened where like the people who I'm like the best friends with, like they don't necessarily live near me, all of them, but they share a lot of the same values I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do think that's something that I found, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because I talk about this all the time, but I did find that as I kind of started progressing and doing self growth and working on myself, it was almost, and I've got my own beliefs about God, the universe, what have you, but it almost seemed like a video game more or less, where like I would level up, and then out of nowhere I would meet people that completely like complement that level that I just got to and had that similar mindset. And then I would level up a little more and I would meet new people that just seem to fit that perfectly. And it seems to continue to happen where when you put in the work and invest that time and effort, again, life, Gaia, Mother Nature, whatever you think it is, will almost throw you a bone more or less and say like, all right, like you've been doing this, here's an opportunity, or here's a new friend, or here's a new business partner. And it's fascinating when you really get in tune with stuff like that, how many opportunities open up. But you have to be willing to, and it seems like you did it without even thinking about it, like just being open to like knowing who to surround yourself with and what situations to dive in on and which ones to kind of turn and steer away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of sorted itself out into that. It's interesting how incredibly powerful the mind is. And some of the mentorship I've gotten, they've instructed me to like do affirmation statements or like a vision for your life and stuff. And I was like, well, yeah, I'd like to, that's probably good to do, right? So I did it, and I understand through sports, like your mental game is like 80% of it. Because if you don't have that, it really does not matter what you bring talent wise, like you're not going to win. So I did that, and it was interesting to watch, like, as I would read that vision statement every morning, like my brain was alerted to things in my environment that I would not have been otherwise. So like part of the vision statement about a year ago now was like buying a house in the area. And like I wasn't looking for it, but then a few months later, like it was in my head every single day. And I saw a house pop up, and I was like, let's go buy a house. And like financially and everything, it worked out and it was fine. We were in a spot where we could, but it wasn't, I don't think if I would have been reiterating that in my mind and letting my subconscious kind of churn it around, I don't think I would have pulled that trigger and done that. So it's very interesting how like you can control your outcome by consciously feeding your mind stuff that it then does subconscious stuff with. It's just very interesting.
Yeah, this is something I talk about all the time is you need to be proactive in setting the intention and focus of what you want to think about. It's just like watching TV. So many people have no control over the remote or what channel is playing on the TV, and whatever channel pops up, that's just what they allow themselves to watch. But they don't realize that they can pick up the remote of their mind, what they're experiencing, and change the channel by setting these intentions and putting your focus on very specific things. So that's something I do every single morning is, I do these affirmations as well, where I think about gratitude. So just gratitude for the fact that I woke up. There are a lot of people who don't get that opportunity. The fact that I'm laying in a comfy bed, the fact that like all these things. So I set the standard of abundance right away. So gratitude, abundance, positivity, love and connection, growth, like all these things I just set up right at the beginning of the day. And yeah, since I've started doing that, it is uncanny the change. And again, whether it's placebo and that just makes me work harder in those areas, or it is some higher power or a combination, that's where it comes down to belief. But I've seen that work for a lot of people. So again, for anyone listening, even if you like aggressively disagree with it, go do it and prove me wrong. And we'll see. Like just do an experiment. That's my favorite way of like, if anything that we say in here, you're like, no, there's no way. Cool, do it. Like see for yourself. And if we're wrong, let us know. We'll go back to the drawing board. But I'm very confident in the fact that that is a very important aspect, because the only thing that you're stuck with your entire life is what's inside your meat suit. So use it well. All right. So we will wrap up. I know you have a very busy schedule, but before I ask my last question, where can people connect with you, and then tell them a little bit about Resilience RX?
So I'm on my personal profiles on Facebook and Instagram as well. But I have a business profile at Resilience RX. If you're in the local area, I'm inside CrossFit Rokius right now in Oconomowoc. Actually, I'm in the building right now. I also have a website, www.resiliencrxpt.com, and you can feel free to email me, sarah@resiliencrxpt.com. Tend to get back to everyone within 24, at the bare minimum, hopefully 12 hours. So,
All right. You heard it there first. If you have aches and pains, better go see her. All right. So I always ask one final question, and I'm always very curious to hear the answer. So for you right now in your life, what is the next step in you becoming your best self?
so right now, that's actually a pretty easy one to answer because I'm in the midst of a whole bunch of stuff right now. So I'm moving locations and hiring. So I will do a shameless plug. If you know any physical therapists that are looking for a job, please have them contact me. Passionate physical therapists, that is. So those are the two next steps, and unintelligently or intelligently, I'm doing them both at the same time because the timing was right for both of them. So
All right. Yeah. If you are listening to this and you're a passionate PT in the area or not, and you're looking to come to the area, who doesn't love Wisconsin? Definitely give her a check out. And then, yeah, honestly, like if you are an athlete, if you're looking to get into fitness and you haven't because you have some type of ache, some type of pain, like she's not paying me at all to say this. I just genuinely believe it is that important. Like, go talk to her. Even if you're not stopping in, send her an email. Like she said, she just gave you her email. She gave you a free resource to reach out and ask questions. So take advantage. Now, I'm going to wrap it up with that. Sarah, I want to thank you for coming on, taking the time out of, yes, your very busy schedule between all the plans you're making and still having a full client load and just, the organized chaos that is owning a business. And I want to thank you more than that. I want to thank you for really just the path that you're pursuing. Like it's so obvious how passionate you are about helping people and showing them how to optimize their bodies, optimize their minds, optimize their lives. And I just have so much respect for people who devote their day and their life to truly serving people in the best way they know how. So thank you for that. Thank you for everything you're putting out into the world. And I hope that this will get more people coming to you, or at least get their eyes on your socials and what you're doing.
thanks, Trevor. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
You bet. And come back anytime. So for people listening, if you have made it to this point and you have not hit the subscribe button, please hit the subscribe button. We are trying to get this show out to as many people as possible. We're building a movement. We're building the spreading of the message of truly pursuing that best version of who you are. So subscribe. If you have any comments or questions, that's what the comment section is for. And until next week, keep pursuing that best version of yourself.